So, where are you?
I'm in Brighton at home actually, and actually behind me is that goes all the way to the floor. I've just dug out loads of my life story memorabilia. Um, yeah.
Uh, Are you feeling wistful, or is there a reason for that?
Oh, yeah. I'm not really going to go through them. I think after this album's out the way, I'll start to go through it and collate it all. And I'm thinking of just photographing it all and then throwing it out. That's what I tend to do these days. Downsizing, when you get to a certain age.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be ready for the great beyond. You can't leave it all to the people who love you. No, it's funny. I should clear my throat. I'll put a little bit of this in the intro, but I should clear my throat before we have
Mm.
a chat. So I was nuts on My Life Story as a kid. Like
Oh.
The Golden Mile was a big record around my way, and I don't actually think I've seen you in the flesh. Not that we're in the flesh, but actually looking at your face. Uh, since one night when me and my girlfriend at the time, my teenage girlfriend, big feelings, drove to Sheffield to see you at the lead mill, and I think you'd opened with Sparkle, and
Mm.
my girlfriend out of nowhere pulled out some sparklers
Yeah.
and lit them, and immediately, like, all of the security in the venue, like, ran towards her to almost be like, and I was, well, rightly, that she had a flammable object in public, and I was like, oh my god, like, what is happening? But she was nuts on your band. So, in the unlikely event that she's listening to this episode, hello Sam, here I am speaking to Jake Shillingford from My Life Story.
Hello, Sam. And yeah, I mean, of course, yeah, that did happen quite frequently. The Parlophone Records agreed to me my pleas of we wanted to do a promo sort of gift, I think. And when Sparkle came out, yeah, we had a branded sparklers with sort of My Life Story logo on them, so that's where she would have got them from. Or unless maybe some fans started to then get their own, but initially there was a sort of, I don't know, we sent out about 100, 200 branded packets of sparklers.
I'm pretty sure she brought her own sort of
Right,
corner
okay.
corner
Good,
shop
good
own
for her.
brand. Yeah. Was there not some hoo ha about? I don't know. Like, that feels a little bit like a hard one to get signed off with, the fear of litigation, like
Yeah,
major
well, I
record company.
think, yeah, the initial idea, I think, was because it was from the marketing department. So I think they thought that when they sent out these would have been, sending out the CD to the likes of yourself, really, of that
Yeah.
time. So I think they probably thought that there would have been responsible journalists and DJs, just maybe looking at them and using them on the appropriate evening in November. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
they probably started bringing them to gigs, and then that sort of took off from there.
I have to say as well, I did an episode recently with Andrew Harrison from Select magazine, and it was kind
Mm.
of like a bit of a sort of deep dive into my youth and nostalgia and such like. And I put on Facebook, I said, "Oh, I'm speaking to the former editor of Select," and a load of people jumped in who were like, "I'll never forgive them for their review of My Life Stories, The Golden Mile." And you say people like myself, but I actually remember having a really early. I was obviously just a fan then, and I remember having a really early example of feeling my frustrations with the music press, that they had given such a poor, sniffy rating to a record I loved so much, and it sort of
Mm.
shaped how I was from that point on as a writer. Really, being like, you know what? I mean, I get for 5 seconds it's funny to say a record is of no worth, but
Yeah.
it's a terribly mean thing to do as well.
Yeah, I think that I mean that one was so particularly vitriolic and sort of personal that it was sort of, when something is so, there's obviously something going on. So, I don't think it was a reflection of the record itself. So actually it was a water of the duck's back. And I think that, I mean, my life story, we're always very lucky that apart from, that particular um, review. We were a journalist band. Actually, I think a lot of journalists really wanted My Life Story to do well because we came from the streets. We weren't some invented record company band. You know, the whole orchestra of My Life Story was formed by me, you know, going up to people in the street, going up to people on the London Underground and asking them, you know, seeing them carrying violin cases and asking them if they wanted to cross the River Styx over to from classical music into, you know, alternative music. So, you know, I think that, you know, it was a bit of a shock though, that I have to be honest, when that came out. And I'm glad fans are still talking about it and defending us to this day. That's really nice to hear.
Yeah, no, absolutely. John Earls, again, another shout out. The journalist John Earls, he hasn't let it go. But no, I guess a little bit with, you know, that kind of Britpop era was so big for me. My teenage years fell right at that moment. But I was like a big kind of grunge kind of kid before that, and I'm waffling. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I wonder whether you found My Life Story. I wonder if you found the response to My Life Story a little bit polarizing, because here you were kind of doing this sort of like Martin Fry kind of. I mean, it was very different to what was happening within kind of quote unquote alternative music at the time, when everyone's wearing parkas and you know. Did you feel that?
Yeah, but I mean, you have to remember that we were doing that in the 80s as well.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
you know, I mean, well, I say 80s, I mean, well, very late 80s, 89, 90 was when really the seed of My Life Story as an orchestral lineup started. And we were, you know, we were appalling live, because, I mean, to come up with that idea,
yeah,
uh, from an indie perspective, I mean, you know, ABC was very polished and was very, the whole kind of thing behind ABC was to create like this sort of almost perfect pop record, whereas My Life Story were definitely much more, you know, from the indie circuit, and you know, we wanted to be really more of a rough diamond, really,
yeah,
and so, you know, it did take a while for My Life Story to sort of to sound good and to kind of get the ideas across, and to gel the string players with you know, indie musicians, and to get violins to sound even good at, you know, playing at the Falcon. You know, how do you get how do you get that all to work? So it did take a while. So all of that combined, you know, that so we were sort of, you know, we were already, you know, when Britpop came along, we were already a Britpop band, if you sort of mean. We just weren't the sort of big famous one, you know. So
that is that is weird, you know, like that when you kind of talk about that proto Britpop, that kind of '93 thing, you know, Suede on the cover of Selects, and
yeah. And our first single came out in '93.
yeah, it is weird though that in a way, you know, the first record's called Mornington Crescent. That can't be more Camden if it tried. That you almost don't get kind of more props really, because when Blur start bringing in kind of orchestral sounds for Universal or To the End or whatever, you've kind of been doing it for a couple of years at that point.
Yeah, we've been doing it before any of those. In fact, the only band that I know that were doing something like that was the Band of Holy Joy, who I loved, and we supported the Band of Holy Joy, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, you know, I was talking to a friend the other day, and I was saying that it's quite bizarre, really, because particularly my age as well, is that, you know, I was quite old. I'm much older than, you know, your Britpop artists. I'm like 4 or 5 years older than them. So, you know, I'm the same age as Miles Hunt from the Wonder Stuff, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
My Life Story were going around, and we supported the Wonder Stuff. So, you know, as a orchestral band. So, you know, my kind, I suppose my place and is a weird one, in that I identify in a bizarre way more with bands like Carter, or bands of that time, or House of Love, or whoever it may be, than maybe with the sort of Britpop bands. I mean, I love Suede. I think they're an incredible band, and when they came along, that seemed to sort of do a lovely. They were like the bridge between that sort of messy late 80s era, where no one was really sure what was going on, wasn't really a scene. You know, that was a really nice sort of arc that moved us into sort of, as you say, 93, 94, 95. But yeah, I mean, it's you know, I don't mind that. I think Britpop's quite a good. I mean, Britpop has changed for people like you and me now. I mean, there are teenagers around now that call Echo and the Bunnymen Britpop, and if you go to America,
Yeah,
then the psychedelic furs are Britpop.
yeah,
I mean, it basically means British pop music now.
yeah. I'm very strict on it though. Actually, I can. It's one of those things I sort of tried not to bring politics up at parties
Come
and
on then,
such
what's the
like.
first? Where do you go? I spoke to some big Britpop fan, and they told me that the first Britpop record is I Last of the Famous International Playboys by Morrissey. They think that's the first. That's where it starts. They
Oh,
thought.
that's very interesting, isn't it?
What
I,
is that? Is that 92?
yeah, yeah, it is.
Something like
Yeah,
that.
I frame a lot of it around. You remember the BBC Two sort of Shangalang Britpop Now, where Damon
Hmm.
Albarn is kind of strutting around as like a country gent.
Yeah.
So in a way, I sort of erase the memory. I like these bands, but I sort of erase people like Saint Etienne and Denim and such like, and
Okay. Yeah. Because a lot of people. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
sort of frame it all really around the summer of '95 because there was this
Okay.
moment. I remember going on a French exchange with the aforementioned Sam, and I remember getting back and that being on the telly and me being like, right now, this music is the coolest thing in the world, and I'm a teenager and it's amazing. And but weirdly, PJ Harvey's on that show, and I don't think she's got anything to do with Britpop, so it's all very arbitrary and weird. You were saying about the late '80s and being a bit older than everyone. Um, Surely not. I mean, I know you're telling the truth, but what's your secret? Like how old are you now, Jake?
58.
I mean, you're not though, are you? How are you managing? How are you managing to stay like the man I can see in front of me?
What's the secret? Well, my father's 91,
Oh,
so I think there's a lot in the genes.
yeah.
Um, I think just um I mean, I know it sounds boring, but yeah, just try not to be excessive in any department whatsoever, and try do everything, but do it all with a clear head and an understanding of what impact that may have on you. I think that's the sort of key to it. Although it's quite interesting you raise it because the whole if there is a concept on the new album, it is a little bit about growing old and understanding what your place in the world is, and particularly um the title track "Running Out of Heartbeats," which is the current single at the moment, because that's about when Neil Armstrong came back from the moon, and of course it was well documented that he retired from public life, and Buzz Aldrin went and opened up supermarkets and things. And he allegedly said that he felt that he'd used all his heartbeats up on from landing on the moon, and so he was going to take it easy for the rest of his life. And I always loved that as a quote, and I like this idea that we have this there's actually a theory. It's called finite heartbeat theory, that we're all born with a certain number of heartbeats, and we should use them wisely. I think it comes from maybe Sioux Indian proverb.
Oh,
Uh,
hello.
I haven't really gone that. I've not been able to go back that far, but so yeah, yeah, I was sort of quite into it. I think it's quite a sweet, almost spiritual concept, that you've got to use your heartbeats wisely. And then I sort of started thinking, well, classic love songs, they mention tropes like please look after my heart and I will give my heart to you, and lyrics that we've heard over 40, 50 years. And so I was wondering whether, if you really fall in love and your heart is beating and racing really fast, are you using up those heartbeats because you've fallen in love? Are you wasting them, or are they kind of intrinsic to your life, that your life is shortened by being so in love? I love that idea. I think it's quite fatalistic, so yeah.
I mean, at the risk of ruining your, that sort of beautiful spiritual observation, I remember reading similar when I was a kid about orgasms. I, th- I'm sure I read in a tabloid. I'm sure I read in like a tabloid when I was a kid that there was only so many times you could orgasm in your life. which is a bit grubbier really than what you're talking about.
Well, I'm sure that's very much out of a Victorian manual somewhere.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. I I guess like the thing I find interesting when you look at your discography is obviously there's these 19 years, and I know you did other things during that time, but there's these 19 years where My Life Story aren't making new music. Is there something about, and the last record, what was 4, 5 years ago now? So,
Yeah.
like like we're speeding up again, right? In terms of,
Mm.
how quick things are getting out the door. What is there something about getting older or that amount of time when you weren't making music as My Life Story that has made you almost kind of want to appreciate the time you have to be able to do it?
Yeah, there's a bit of that. I mean, in all honesty, I think, well, I mean, life does get in the way quite a lot, and I had some circumstances where I wasn't really able to put records out because I was looking after a partner that was quite ill. But my wife now is really the reason why, I've put out 2 albums in 4 years, because she's a fan, and she can't really see why I'm not doing it. And I think that creative people sometimes just need a little bit of love close at hand to, an encouragement to get the wheels in motion again. And so it's really testament to her that, I'm back out there. And so much so that when we tour, Natasha is always on the merch stand, she's there. She knows a lot of our fans and supporters, and in some ways, it's brought the family back together again. Um,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
yeah. So she's like, I compare her to, which one is the last of the Henry VIII's wives? It's
Oh, my.
which one? Hang on a minute, I've got to work it out now. Parr, Catherine Parr. She's like Catherine Parr. She brought all the all the madness that being created from all the years before. She brought all the family together again. So that's the sort of headline reason. But also, I do, and I have continued to make music in that time because I write a lot of music for television, and have done some film as well and some promos and trailers. So I've continued working. I have my own studio. It's just that I work very, very anonymously, with a producer called Nick Evans. And we've done that now for 12 years. So it's not like I've just sort of, I'm one of these sort of very lazy,
No, 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 no.
you know,
I really didn't
yeah.
think that at all. But I guess I kind of get a bit of a feel. There's an awful lot on this podcast where I speak to people whose music I liked a lot as a teenager. It's a bit of an obsession to almost sort of,
Well,
I don't
same
know.
here. Yeah, same here.
Yeah, it's almost sort of a bit of box ticking in a sense. Like, oh my God, like I must speak to this person. That record was so important for me. And I'm sort of thinking about people like, although they haven't been on the podcast yet, like I'm almost thinking about people like, say, Sleeper, or I don't know. I had a conversation with Ultrasound for another thing I did,
Mhm.
and I think in a weird way, it's like I think it's almost like there's this sort of moment, this sort of flourish of what that time was, what the 90s was with the music press and, Top of the Pops and TFI Friday and all the things that were going on then. And then kind of like life kind of like gets in the way. And then there's a period where it feels like, oh, you know what? I don't know, almost like I want to sort of recontextualize what I did when I was younger, and I want to kind of pull it all together. And you just get a feel for it, I think, on this side of the microphone. And I was looking at your website before, and I was like, it does feel a little bit like would be you. It does feel a little bit like Jake is kind of, just the fact that you've got music press cuttings behind you right now. That it is almost like, you know what, I'm taking this really seriously again, and I'm kind of pulling together all of my achievements. Am I off base there, or?
Not at all. No, I do take songwriting incredibly seriously. So, I suppose self A&R, how I A&R myself. I'm quite hard on myself in terms of, quality, output quality. So, to me, when you put out a record, it's such an important legacy and a marker as to who you are as a creative person. A lot of this comes from my parents. Both my parents were artists, so to me, it's why. why put a load of crap up in an art gallery? I mean, it's just because you've got some free space, to hang some things. I guess the sort of yeah, the quality control is quite high, and I guess right, subject matter is important to me. So again, it's important to me that the songs I write, all have a meaning, and they all stand alone. In fact, this new album is almost the complete opposite to a concept record. I mean, we've sort of got so used to almost since Sergeant Pepper that something has to be a concept album. This is not a concept album. This is 10 songs that me and Nick and I have written into the best of our ability, put on a record because they happen to be written in the same year. That is the concept. I mean, there is a concept in the fact that the world was spinning around at that time and events were going on around me, and technology is of that time as well. So that does make the record cohesive. But yeah, I mean, but I'm quite a passionate person, really. When I perform, I leave it all on stage, and I like to think I do that with albums. So I suppose maybe that might be one of the reasons why we haven't done so many.
Yeah, it also just feels though a little bit like, I mean, this is a little bit inside baseball for the listeners, but I got sent like a track by track. Like bands don't really do that anymore. It was actually like,
okay.
no, but I was like, I was delighted. I was like, oh wow, this makes what I do an awful lot easier. It just feels like I don't know. It just feels like you're gearing up for a period of activity and celebration of your band, in a sense that maybe I wouldn't have thought that you would have been doing, 10 years ago, other than kind of reuniting for a Golden Mile anniversary show or something. It just feels a bit more, what I mean, active.
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, we did a lot of reunion shows, as you well know, with the original lineup. Would do just one show, at the Shepherd's Bush Empire, or Coco or somewhere like that, and it would just be the one, and we'd bring the mountain to Mohammed, and doing those, there was a frustration just in the fact that putting all that work into one show, and then everyone saying goodbye to each other was quite. I found that quite hard, actually. I just wanted to carry on doing it.
Yeah.
But there was also, and I have spoken to a few other bands, like you mentioned Sleeper earlier, who are friends of mine who also live down here in Brighton. About we've talked quite a lot about the feeling of what it feels like playing nostalgic music to a nostalgic crowd, and my view on it is that I think it is quite a dangerous game to play, and I think that you do need to balance it. I think even possibly from your mental health point of view, living in the past is quite dangerous.
Yeah.
And particularly creatively. So, my approach has been somewhat different in that I'm not saying that we're going to go out on tour in February and just do the new album. We will be doing, music across, 30 years. But I just think as a creative person, you've got to always look forward. And I think that it's quite interesting that it's particularly the late 80s and the Britpop era. All of those bands seem to be doing a lot of nostalgia shows. Absolutely not against them, and I think it's sometimes just a wonderful euphoric experience to go back in time and feel that. But I do really think that. Sorry, go on.
No, that's fine. I was just sort of thinking, like, I've sort of always, and it's no slur in these events because I'm sure they are a right laugh, but I've always kind of veered away from going to a Star Shaped or something like that, which I know you did at one point, but just because I don't feel like that person yet. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still interested in new music, and a lot of the, like I still get excited about a new Blur record when Blur put a record out. It's not like, oh, I'd rather just listen to these songs that I liked when I was 15. And there is some appeal to that, but I'm not the person I was when I was 15. So I almost want to kind of grow with the music that I like. So I understand totally what you're saying. it does feel like this is your most. I mean, this is a rubbish way of describing music, but it does feel like this is your most guitar-y record. Was there
Yeah.
any? Was that conscious? Was that deliberate?
Yeah. I wanted to draw upon some of the music that maybe I hadn't addressed too much when because my life story were quite similar to the Manic Street Preachers in a way back in the day. We had a manifesto. We had a very particular list of rules. You had to, in my life story's case, you had to dress up to go to our shows.
Yeah,
We're not going to let we thought, well, if nightclubs are going to have a door policy, why can't you do that at an indie gig? And our fans really sort of responded to that. And
yeah,
so there was all that, so there was a lot of stuff around my life story. It wasn't just about songs. It was the image of the band. Everything was carefully planned, and I made no bones about the fact that, it was a master plan, and that was an exciting time. However, I think making a record now in my 50s, I just feel like I wanted to draw on sort of influences that maybe hadn't come to the fore too much in those days. So these would be more like really odd indie bands from the 70s and the 80s. I listened back to the album actually yesterday. I hadn't heard it for about a month, and I could hear the Red guitars. I could hear the Church. I could hear a lot of sort of angular and new wave bands that I used to listen to that no one's ever heard of. The
I
Chills.
think I only know those. But well, I know the Chills, but I think I only know those bands because there's that John Robb book that's I think it's called Death to Trad Rock, and it kind of covers not really kind of C86, but like kind of like the guitar, the British guitar underground kind of after that, but not really kind of Grebo either. Like it's more sort of DIY guitar bands. But weirdly though, the last song, which is maybe the least guitar-y, for want of a better term, is my favorite song on it. I think you have a deliciously wet vocal, if I was right in a review.
That's really interesting you say that, because I was struggling with that vocal. Because yeah,
Really,
that's fascinating you picked up on that, because yeah, wow, that's really interesting. Because the song's called Wasted, and it's a sort of almost like a monologue. It's a sort of, it's a continual sort of build up of things that are wasted. It's, I love listing songs. I mean, 12 Reasons Why I Love Her was a shopping list of love.
yeah,
And Wasted is a sort of the other side of that almost. And again, it sort of ties in a little bit with, looking back on your life and, wondering if you've used those heartbeats up wisely. But yeah, there's a sort of certain way that you have to sing it, that there's a lot of this,
right, yeah,
in the way it's sung. So when I spoke to Ben Hillier, who mixed the record, I was really concerned about how my voice would come across, and he managed to sort of temper it a little bit. But yeah, I think wet is a pretty good adjective.
yeah. No, I do. I think that's. I think there's a lot of that in your vocals. Like I think that I'm trying to remember really the names, but when you kind of go back to like not the singles from like the Golden Mile, but like the more sort of like tender songs, I always would be like, oh, you can kind of hear the back of the throat,
Yeah, and I've loved those emotive songs. I think if we look back at Britpop, I think if there's one major criticism, there was maybe not enough emotion, in that particular era. Obviously there are great emotive songs, but I think that there was a lot of a lot of it was trying to being a peacock and trying to it was particularly the sort of ladette culture. We lost a bit of tenderness, I think, within some songs. So, but I've always been really, as I said earlier, I'm a very passionate person, I guess. And so, when I sing, it's funny actually, because when I sing the songs in the studio, I do sing them like a performance. And as someone who records a lot of vocals anyway for my job, it does. I don't see too many people, go in and hold their arms up
Yeah.
wide open, and and sing as if they were on stage. And I still do that, actually. And I think that hopefully that comes across.
You don't put the suit on or the kiss curl though.
No, but I have done, I've done the Martin Gore singing my pants technique on sensitive songs. That can help.
Amazing. Listen, I better wrap up because we're at time, but it's been so nice to speak to you. A real treat, and another one ticked off from the column of people who made music that mattered to me so much as a teenager. This is going to make you feel really uncomfortable and weird, but when we were talking, I was just thinking, I've done so much snogging to this man's music. I was going. There was a bit when you were talking, and I was going, oh, all I did to the Golden Mile was snog my girlfriend at the time. Listen, I'm going to try and come to the 100 Club. So if you see someone with sparklers, then it may well be me.
Well, we'll do our best to make sure you're not ejected from the building, James.
Amazing. So nice to speak to you, Jake. And good luck with a new record.
Thanks very much.